Okay. So for today, our focus pose is upward facing dog, or Urdhva Mukha Shvanasana. And so as such, our focus parts of the body will be a lot of focus on our upper back, some on our mid and lower back, and then some chest openers as well. So for centering today, I'm going to invite you to come to a comfortable seated position. For me, that's going to be an easy cross-legged position. If either half lotus with one leg crossed up or full lotus is comfortable for you, go ahead and take that, or butterfly pose, whatever is comfortable for you for a comfortable seated position. And then once you're there, go ahead and shift into the position until it feels comfortable, something that you can sustain with comfort and ease for a few minutes. Maybe hands resting, palms down to be a little bit more grounding and centering. And if it is comfortable for you, you can go ahead and close your eyes to help eliminate all of the distractions that come in through our sense of vision. And start to calm the body, mind, by bringing your attention to your breath. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that it's an automatic switch that you flip and all of a sudden everything is calm, but focusing our mind and our attention solely on our breath helps our body to engage that parasympathetic nervous system, that nervous system in our body that helps to guide our rest and digest systems, letting our mind and our emotions know that in this time, in this place, all is well. If you haven't yet, and it's available to you, bring a light seal to the lips, helping to guide the inhales in through the nose to warm the air, which additionally helps to calm the body. And your exhales guided out through the nose, releasing all that used oxygen. As you've been here for a moment or two, start to feel the parts of the body that are touching the floor and allow them to ground you. So maybe it's your ankles, your legs, possibly your feet, but particularly your sits bones, those points of the pelvic girdle that point down towards the earth, and imagine as if they are roots, stabilizing you to the earth so that as you inhale, your torso, your rib cage, your collarbones, the crown of your head float up as if effortless. Full, complete inhales, filling the belly, letting the belly soften and relax, expanding the side ribs, the back ribs, and towards the front. Maybe even gentle lift of the collarbones as the shoulders and the shoulder blades melt down. And on an exhale, the belly deflates, the ribs knit back together, the collarbones lower. We're going to transition into our warm-ups, and as we do, you can continue with your eyes closed You can gently blink your eyes open and find a spot to rest your gaze, or maybe it would feel more comfortable to move in between the two, and that's fine too. Taking an inhale, release your hands, reach the arms up towards the sky. And on an exhale, release your right hand down towards your right hip. Reach the left hand up towards the ceiling. Pack that shoulder blade down towards the back waist, and then exhale to side bend over to the left. If your eyes are open, you're gazing under that left upper arm. Breathe here. Feel all the gaps between the ribs on the side body opening. And then inhale, reach that arm up to the ceiling. And then as you exhale, bring that left hand across to the right knee. Right hand can stay at the right hip, or maybe you bring it back around closer to the tailbone as you bring the gaze over the right shoulder, and continue to breathe. Lengthen inhales and lengthen exhales here. On your next natural inhale, lift both arms up, and then exhale, left hand comes down, right arm reaches up as the shoulder and shoulder blade pull down, and then side bend over to the left. And think about directing your inhales into the spaces between your ribs on that right side body. Inhale to reach the right arm up. Exhale, right hand to the left knee. And then a gentle twist, not straining, just a gentle twist over to the left. Inhale, reach both arms up. And then exhale, bring the hands down in front of your legs, or if you're sitting in seated pike pose, hands onto the legs. You can stay right here or start to walk those hands forward any amount, allowing the torso to come over the legs, opening up that low back and the hips, and stopping when your body says it's far enough. And then we'll hold here for a breath or two. Maybe you let that head hang heavy, releasing tension out of the back of the neck. Inhale, lift the head, press into the floor, walk the hands back, and bring the hands all the way back behind you, fingertips pointing towards the seat. And start to release those shoulders and shoulder blades, pulling the elbows together behind you, lifting the sternum up towards the ceiling, engaging the lowest ribs towards the top of the pelvis. And you can stay right here, or maybe you start to float your seat up, or if you choose, paying attention to which leg is on top before you move them, uncrossing the legs, planting the feet, knees pointed straight up towards the ceiling to start. And as you inhale, you float the seat up, coming into a reverse tabletop, and either with that chin tucked towards the chest, or maybe gaze up towards the ceiling for one more breath. Exhale to release the seat down, and then recross your legs, this time with the other leg on top or in front. Taking an inhale, reach the arms up. As you exhale, this time you're going to lower that left hand side bend over to the left to start. And then inhale, reach it back up. Exhale to bring that right hand across to the left knee. And now maybe this time it's appropriate to bring that left hand back behind you just a little bit more and deepen into your twist if that's feeling appropriate and good in your body. Inhale, both arms up. Exhale, lower the right hand, reach that left arm up and over, side bend over to the right. Inhale, bring that hand up and then over to the right as you twist, looking over the right shoulder. Take a nice long full inhale here, reaching up. Exhale, hands down, and then notice this side. It might feel different. Maybe the second time through it feels like you have a little bit more space, but maybe because the other leg is on top or in front, you feel like there's a little less space, because both sides of the body are not always going to respond evenly. Relax into it, releasing tension out of the neck. And then inhale to walk back up to center. Take those hands all the way back behind you. Fingertips pointing towards the seat, elbows pulling towards each other, shoulder blades melting down the back, lifting that sternum. You can stay there, or you can inhale to float the hips, or perhaps you plant the feet again and float the hips up into a reverse tabletop. Tucking the chin to protect the neck if that's better for you, or gaze up to the ceiling, and then exhale, lower the seat down. Just go ahead and let the legs fall over to one side, swinging the feet around back behind you, coming into the tabletop position. And right away, let's start paying attention to our hand placement so that as we move through the rest of the class, we can follow this same guideline. So you're making those wide starfish with the hands, opening up the fingers, and then really pressing the base knuckle of each finger and the thumb into the mat, almost creating a suction cup in the palm. And then take a little bit of a grip with your fingertips, pressing them. So it's almost as if your fingers are clawing. Elbow creases facing each other, shoulder blades pulling down towards your back waist, and your shoulder blades protracting, meaning that you're kind of pulling them apart, broadening your upper back as if they're wings. Taking an inhale here, you're going to slide your left hand forward. Keep it resting on the floor or the mat, and then as you exhale, slide the right leg back. Now you can hold right here and then maintain all of that muscle engagement so that your core, you can feel your core firing up, your pelvis parallel, the quadricep of the right leg, then the right shoulder, you're keeping integrity across that shoulder girdle so you're not dumping into it. You can hold right there, or you can inhale and float the heel and the hand up, pulling the hand forward as you push the heel back as if they're in oppositions. And then exhale, release all of that down. Steady into the center. Inhale, reach that right arm forward. And then extend that left leg back on the exhale. Take that moment again and feel the core engagement, firing up the quadricep, leveling the pelvis, and then inhale, float the hand and float the heel if you wish. And pull the hand forward as you push the heel back. Exhale, release all of that back down to the floor, keeping the toenail side of the foot down. Take an inhale, press into the fronts of the ankles and the tops of the feet, and float the knees, and hold here for one cycle of breath. And then exhale, release it down. Slide the hands forward, keeping the seat lifted off the heels. Start to melt your heart towards the floor, coming into puppy dog pose. If it's available to you, maybe you rest your forehead on the mat. Maybe you start to see if you can inch your fingers forward, really opening up the spaces along the side body, armpit, shoulders, chest, and upper back. Inhale to float the head up. Start to walk those hands back. Place those hands and arms again in that same alignment, engaging all of that upper back. Tuck the toes into the mat. Take an inhale and float the knees. Hold it for a breath. Exhale, release it down. Slide the hands forward so you can lower to your elbows. And then from here, you can either hold right here, go back to tabletop and float the knees, or inhale, start to press into the toes as you float the hips up, maybe extending the legs a little bit more so that you're coming into dolphin pose. Pulling those shoulder blades again towards the back waist and then out to the sides as if they're wings. Inhale to lift your gaze towards your hands. Press your hands into the mat. Maybe you step them back a hand step or two to bring them into better alignment for your downward facing dog. Adho Mukha Shvanasana. Be keeping those knees bent if you need to for extra space in the low back and hips, or starting to melt the heels towards the floor and extending the legs if that feels good in your body. Gaze towards the toes as long as you're keeping the ears between the upper arms. Take one more breath here. Inhale, bring the gaze towards the hands, and then step walk or take a light hop to bring the toes behind the palms. Knees bent any amount as you exhale into forward fold. And again, pay particular attention to the back of the neck, letting that head hang heavy. Take an inhale, press the hands into the shins and extend the spine long. Exhale, release into forward fold. And then inhale, press into the feet as your foundation as you lift the torso and reach the arms up, coming into equal standing pose. Hands come together to heart center, or perhaps hands are open towards the front of the mat. Now we're going to cover again with Urdhva Mukha Shavasana, upward facing dog. This concept that we've talked about over the last few weeks of Sthira Sukha. So that combination of ease and strength. We're going to be wanting to be able to hold the position and still be able to focus on breath that is flowing in and out smoothly, and as if we could hold the pose with ease, even though the muscles are engaged. Start to float your toes now so that you can feel that engagement of the front of your ankles, and you can feel the big toe ball mound, baby toe ball mound, and the center back of the heel plug in to the foundation of the earth. As you do that, feel the knees stack over the ankles and the kneecaps start to pull up towards the hip crease, really engaging the muscles of the thighs as if they're hugging the femur. Stack the hips over the knees and then think about pulling that bottom rib down and in towards the top of the pelvis. When we do that, what we do is we help to avoid flaring our ribs open, which creates a lot of tension in our low back, and we don't want that much sway. Think about pulling the tailbone energetically down towards the heels, stacking the shoulders over the hips, sternum lifting towards the chin as the chin stays parallel to the floor. Crown of the head floats to the ceiling as the shoulders pull down and away from the ears. Fully engaged with the muscles. This should not feel terribly relaxed. You feel very energetic in this pose. Take an inhale, reach the arms up to the ceiling. As you exhale, soften the knees, fold forward into forward fold, and then start to just toe heel your feet closer together. They don't need to be touching, it's up to you. And then take a little bit deeper bend in that knee, in the knees. Hands can either come grasping the backs of the shins or maybe opposite shins. Or if it's available, maybe you're resting your chest on your thighs and you wrap the forearms behind the knees to grab opposite elbows. With the head hanging heavy, on an inhale, start to straighten your legs any amount that is appropriate for you and start to feel that rounding in your upper back as if you're coming into angry cat. One more breath here. And exhale to release the hands. Soften the knees. Plant your hands down on the mat, setting up that proper hand position that we've talked about. And then step or hop your feet all the way towards the back of your mat, coming either into full plank or lowering the knees down into modified plank. We're going to hold here for about 2 cycles of breath. Again, thinking about that tailbone pulling towards the heels pushing towards the wall behind you, broadening the upper back so the shoulder blades pull open as if they're wings, and then really engaging the bottom rib towards the top of the hips. Take another breath here. And then exhaling either with the knees on or off the mat, start to bend the elbows, squeeze them into the chest as you lower all the way down towards the mat. Now, as we workshop Urdhva Mukha Shavasana, upward facing dog, please feel free to take breaks as you feel your body is asking for them. You can always move out of the pose and come back into it. So paying attention first to our hands and feet, they are the foundation of the pose. You're going to slide your hands back toward so that your base of your palm is towards your bottom rib. And then your elbows are up as if they're chicken wings. And your hands are still pulling those tips of the fingers and the base of each finger pushing them into the mat. You can either, in fact, let's just, everybody, we're going to stay with the tops of our feet down on the mat, pressing those toenails down to the mat so that you're almost even decreasing the crease of the Achilles, and your knees and maybe even parts of your thighs are floating up off the mat already. You can stay right here if this is what's going to be best for your low back, upper back, or neck. Otherwise, on an inhale, you're going to start to push the mat away, extending the arms, and then pulling the chest through those upper arms as you pull the shoulders and the shoulder blades down the back. Sternum reaching for the wall in front of you. And as you're pressing into the tops of your feet, you're floating your knees and thighs off the mat. But the curvature of the spine is coming from the mid-back, not the low back. Your gaze can either be where the wall meets the floor in front of you, or if it's appropriate for your neck, maybe you gaze up to where the wall meets the ceiling. We're going to take one more breath here. And then as you exhale, lower those knees, push up through tabletop, tuck the toes into the mat, take an inhale here to prepare, and then as you exhale, float the hips up, coming into downward facing dog. Take 2 restorative breaths here, reaching that tail up to the ceiling. Releasing your right foot, you can just kickstand those toes down on the mat, or you can inhale and float that heel up towards the ceiling. As you do, think about keeping equal weight in both hands, keeping the collarbones and shoulders parallel to the mat. Take an inhale to prepare. As you exhale, pull the knee up towards the elbow, and then inhale, float that foot up. And exhale, step the foot forward, replacing that right foot where the right hand was, pivoting the back foot down so it's out at about a 30-degree angle. Engage the feet, fronts of the ankles are engaged, heels are plugged down into the mat. Take the hands up to the hips. Inhale, as you float the torso up, you're keeping any amount of bend in that front knee, so that it is coming into a lunge position for Warrior One or Virabhadrasana 1. As we've covered the last few weeks, your hips are trending towards the top of the mat. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be exactly there. Your tailbone is energetically pulling down towards the earth. And then that front engagement of the core, so the pelvis and the bottom ribs pulling towards each other. Taking an inhale, reach the arms up towards the ceiling, and then possibly turning those pinkies towards each other as you pull the shoulder blades down the back. And then if it's appropriate, maybe you exhale and bend just a little deeper into that front knee. Take one more breath here. Exhale, bring the hands down towards center. Interlace your hands. Pivot to the ball of the back foot, and then exhale, lower the back knee down to the mat. You're keeping the pelvis again parallel to the top edge of the mat. You're going to pull that front heel towards the back knee towards the front heel. So you're scissoring as if your thighs are scissoring. Keeping those fingers interlaced. Flip the palms to face away from you, and then push the shoulder blades forward, so you're opening up that upper back. Take one more breath here. Exhale, lower your hands down to the mat. Release the grip with the fingers, and coming into lizard. You can stay here with that back knee down on the mat, or maybe you float it up. And if you feel like your hips and low back have enough space, maybe you lower down to your elbows. Just hold here for a breath. And then replacing those elbows with the hands. If they're down, you're going to inhale, lift the hips enough so you have space to pivot and start to walk towards the long edge of your mat. Hold here, take an inhale to half lift the spine and half forward fold. And then exhale, let the head hang heavy and wide-legged forward fold. Feeling again the foundation with the feet. Just because I say relax into it doesn't mean that the foundation is still not holding you steady. So there's strength in the feet, in the legs, and then as you waterfall the torso over the legs, you're relaxing the neck. Soften the knees. Inhale to bring the hands to the hips, and then float the torso all the way up. Moving into the foundation for Virabhadrasana 2, which we've just covered, you're going to keep that left foot so that the outer arch is parallel to the short edge of the mat, and then pivot the right toes to face the short edge of the mat, and then think about that right heel intersecting the mid arch of the back foot. Big toe bow mound, baby toe bow mound, and base of the heel plugging into the foundation of the floor so you are engaging the front of the ankles. Bring that left hand to that point just above the outside of the knee, engage that muscle. Right hand comes to the inner thigh. As you start to bend into that front knee, you're guiding the knee over the second and third toe. Moving the hands up towards the pelvis, encouraging the pelvis to face towards the long edge of the mat, not necessarily parallel, and engaging again across the front of the core. Sternum's lifting towards the chin, arms floating out from the shoulders as the shoulder blades melt down the back, and then gaze over your right middle finger. Warrior 2. Exhale to release that left hand down to the left thigh. Inhale to extend that front leg. Now you're going to encourage that left hip to slide back towards the left heel as you reach that right arm forward. Take an inhale here, and then exhale, teeter-totter as you extend that left hand up towards the ceiling, lowering the right hand anywhere along that right leg. Thigh, shin, maybe inside or outside of the ankle to the floor as you come into Trikonasana or triangle pose. Fully inhaling and exhaling here. On your next natural exhale, soften into your front knee as you start to slide your left hand down, come to the ball mound of your back foot, and then step it in maybe a good 12 inches with the toes again pointing out about 30 degrees or maybe 10 o'clock on a clock face. Take an inhale to prepare, and then as you exhale, start to melt over your right leg. Now that could be with your hands on the thigh, on the shin, or even hands to the mat. Pyramid pose. Inhale to half lift. Press into your front foot, float the heel of your back foot. You might need to slide it back a few inches so you can push up off the floor, coming into high crescent lunge this time. Again, pay attention to what's happening with your feet and with your pelvis. Let that tailbone energetically pull down towards the floor as this time your front heel pulls towards your back foot and your back foot pulls towards your front foot. So you really want your thighs to be making that scissor sensation again. Hands can either be inhaling and reaching up towards the ceiling, or perhaps you want to come into reverse namaskar to open again that chest, which is hands together at the mid back. Think about some of those cues that we did for upward facing dog in this position. So the chest pulling through those upper arm bones as the tailbone reaches down towards the earth. Taking an inhale here, release the hands, reach them forward. On an exhale, push off that back foot, float it up. Maybe you just kickstand it down on the floor, or maybe you start to pull that back heel up towards the hip, coming into Warrior 3. Now in Warrior 3, this is another perfect pose to practice upward facing dog in the chest. Shoulders pulling away from the ears, hips, the top of the hip points pulling towards the bottom ribs, and your chest is moving forward towards your upper arm bones. Take 2 more breaths here. And then exhale, float that back foot down, step it to the top of your mat, and then either hands together at heart center or hands open in equal standing pose. Close your eyes and take 2 full cycles of breath. Before we move on, thinking about your foundation, thinking about stacking your joints, engaging those muscles of the core, meaning your thigh muscles, gluteal muscles, front abdomen, shoulders melting. Take an inhale, reach the arms up. And then this time, as you exhale, bring the hands to heart center, soften the knees, lower down into forward fold. Now you can stay right here, either hands on the shins, hands on the floor, knees bent in the mount. Or if you would like another variation of an upper back opener, you're going to lift the left toes, slide the left hand underneath the foot so that the toes maybe are even coming up as far as the wrist crease. And that knee can be bent as much as you need to, and the belly maybe even resting on the thighs. And then do the same thing with the right hand and foot. Gorilla pose. As you press the toes against the wrist, again, on an inhale, maybe you start to extend the legs any amount, if that's appropriate for you, and you start to feel the opening across your upper back and your shoulders. Inhale, and then as you exhale, slide the hands out, releasing them to the floor. Place those hands down in the nice wide starfish, and then step, walk, or hop your feet towards the back of your mat. And again, you can stay here in full plank or lower the knees down into modified plank. Holding for 2 cycles of breath. As you engage the core, press the heels to the wall behind you. Gaze is about 6 inches in front of the fingertips, so you're not letting that head droop down. Take an inhale. Exhale, squeeze the elbows in, lowering all the way down to the floor. And then let's pause a moment and work through upward facing dog again. This time we're going to have the toes tucked into the mat so the heels are lifted up, and you're wanting the heels up towards the ceiling and then pulling back to the wall behind you. Hands are going to slide back until the base of the palm is parallel or about even with that bottom rib. Create your suction cup with your hands. Take an inhale. Start to push the floor away. As you do, slide that chest forward. You're pressing into the feet and hands. You're lifting up from the mid-back, not the lower back. The tailbone's reaching towards the heels, and maybe your gaze lifts or gaze stays down in front of you. Take one more breath here. And then this time you can either lower down or drop the knees, or maybe on your exhale, you just push right through, floating the hips up into Urdhva Mukha Shvanasana, downward facing dog. Releasing tension out of the neck. Take 2 restorative breaths here. On your next inhale, soften that left foot. Maybe it stays just kickstand down, or maybe you inhale, float the leg up, opening the left hip towards the left side, but keeping the hands and shoulders parallel to the mat. Exhale, pull that left knee up to the left elbow. Inhale, float it up. And then exhale, step the left foot all the way up to the left hand. Pivot that right foot so that it's pointing out at about 2 o'clock on a clock face. Set up your foundation so that your feet and your ankles are engaged, and then inhale, float the hands up to the hips as you float the torso up and create your hips a little bit more parallel to the top edge of your mat. You're engaging the back thigh muscles so that they are hugging the femur bone. You're pulling that tailbone down towards the floor, lifting the sternum up again towards the chin. And then if you wish, you can either keep your hands on your hips or float them up. Maybe the pinkies turn in towards each other. And then exhale, lower the hands down to shoulder height. Interlace the fingers, but this time the awkward feeling way. Pivot to the ball mound of your back foot, and then exhale to lower that back knee down to the mat. Scissor action with the thighs as the front heel pulls towards the back knee pulls towards the front heel. And then exhale, if it's comfortable in your wrist, you're going to flip the palms around and then pull the hands forward, opening up across that upper back. Exhale, release the hands down inside that front foot, releasing the fingers apart. You can keep that back knee down or tuck the toes and float it up. And if you choose, and there's appropriate space in the left hip, you can lower your elbows down into lizard pose. Full, complete inhales and exhales. And then inhale, replace the hands if they're not there, and then start to float the hips up. So this time you can walk and turn towards that right long edge of the mat. Take an inhale to half lift and extend the spine. And exhale and release, lowering down into wide-legged forward fold while your feet, ankles, and legs stay engaged. Steer Sukha, ease and strength. Inhale, half lift, soften the knees, bring the hands to the hips, and float the torso up. Your right foot is going to stay outer edge parallel to the short edge of the mat. Left toes are going to flip around and point towards the short edge of the mat. Left heel drawing a line to intersect the inner arch of the back foot. Toes should be loose, meaning you can lift them up. They're not gripping the mat, but the back of the heel is plugged in, fronts of the ankles are engaged. That muscle right above the right knee is engaged as the left hand comes inside the left inner thigh and lowers that knee down into a lunge. Pelvis trending towards the long edge of the mat, tailbone trending down towards the floor, sternum lifting, and then shoulders melting from the ears as the hands float up from the shoulders and gaze over that front left middle finger. Hold and breathe. Inhale and extend that front leg. Exhale to shift your right hip back towards your right ankle. Extend that left hand forward and then teeter-totter into Trikonasana, triangle pose. Right thumb coming over the mouth. Gaze can either be at that right hand, or if it's better for your neck, gaze can come down to the left foot. And then also remember, you're keeping that left knee slightly soft. You're not locking it out. Take an inhale. As you exhale, your right hand swings down to frame your front foot and then pivot on that back foot and then step or hop it in a good 12 inches. Toes are turned out to about 2 o'clock on a clock face. And hands can be either on the thigh, shin, or framing that front foot as you come into pyramid pose. Letting the torso waterfall over that left leg as you remember to bring that left hip back in space and encourage the right hip forward in space, trying to keep that pelvis parallel. Inhale to pivot to the ball mound of the back foot. Maybe you need to slide it back a little bit as you bend into your front knee. Hands come to the hips as you inhale the torso up into high crescent lunge. Scissoring action with those thighs, really engaging the inner thighs, pulling towards each other to help that pelvis also stay parallel to the front edge of the mat. Your chest, the shoulders are pulling away from the ears, shoulder blades moving down towards the back waist as the sternum lifts. And you can keep your hands on your hips, or you can inhale, reaching those arms up towards the ceiling, but keeping that upward facing dog feeling and lift in the chest. Exhale to lower the hands down to shoulder height. You're going to inhale to press into your front foot and then press off that back foot. Create a little bit more space here on my mat to either let that foot kickstand down or start to float that right heel up towards the same height as the right hip. As you do, thinking about engaging the bottom ribs in, encouraging that right hip to stay parallel to the left hip, encouraging the chest to stay open as if it's reaching up towards the upper arms. So upward facing dog in the chest and upper back. One more breath here. And then exhale, float that right foot down to step to the left. Hands together at heart center or hands open facing the front. Close the eyes if that's comfortable for you. Return to your breath. Inhale to blink the eyes open. Feel the foundation with your feet. Inhale, reach the arms up. Exhale, hands together through the center and lower all the way down into forward fold. Inhale, press into the shins and extend the spine. And then exhale, plant the hands, step the feet back. Hold just for one cycle of breath in plank or modified plank. Exhale to lower all the way down to the mat. And this time, allow the torso to fully rest on the mat. Maybe the top or the center of the forehead also resting on the mat. Start to walk the inner thighs, calves, ankles, and feet together. So you're going to squeeze both legs and feet together as if you're making one leg. You're welcome to keep your hands right here under your shoulders, or maybe you reach your hands so that they are down alongside the outer thigh. On an inhale, float the forehead away from the floor. Maybe you start to lift the collarbones and the sternum a little bit up off the floor. Maybe, if it's appropriate, you start to float the feet up, coming into this variation of Superman pose. Hold for breath. Exhale, release it down. Turn the left side of the face to the mat, lowering that left cheekbone. Get us a passive neck stretch here. And then inhale, turn that forehead back down to the mat. Engage the legs together. This time you can keep their hands back where they were, or move those hands out to the letter T, out from the shoulders. On an inhale, float the forehead. Maybe you float the sternum. Maybe you float the legs. One more breath here. And then exhale, release it down. This time turning the right cheek down towards the mat. And then one last time. Forehead down to the mat, engage the legs. Maybe you return the hands to the outer thighs. Maybe they stay in the letter T, or maybe you reach them out in front of you. On an inhale, float the upper body, pulling the chest forward as if into upper dog, upward facing dog. Float the feet if you choose and hold for 2 cycles of breath. And then exhale, release it down. Rest the forehead. Inhale to start to slide those hands back, tucking the toes into the mat. Inhale to press the mat away. Coming up first, just moving through tabletop to extend those hands forward. And then again, melt that chest. This is sometimes called puppy dog pose. Sometimes it's called melting heart. One more breath here. Inhale to float the head, Walk those hands back, and this time from tabletop, we're going to shift the hips forward and down so that now we're coming into modified plank pose. From there, you have your toes tucked into the mat. You're going to slide those hands back maybe an inch or two so that as you float the knees up off the mat, you're coming directly into upward facing dog again. Tailbone pulling down towards the heels, heels pulling towards the wall behind you, chest reaching between the upper arms. Lower ribs tucked in towards the pelvis. And then exhale, release the knees back down, shift the hips up, lower the elbows to the mat, hands pointing, fingertips pointing away from you, shoulders and shoulder blades engaged down towards the back waist, tuck the toes into the mat, take an inhale to prepare, and as you exhale, float the hips up, one more dolphin. Opening up across the upper back, into the armpits. Inhale to lift the gaze towards the hands, press into the hands to float the hips up into downward facing dog. Inhale to bring the gaze to the hands. Exhale to lower the knees down to the mat. We're going to do a little bit more of the side crow prep, similar to what we did last time. And for that, your options, if you know that you're not interested in side crow, you're going to stay here in tabletop. You can do some alternating floating knees, if that's a better fit for you. Or you can start to walk your hands back towards your knees and sit on your heels, doing that bottom of the foot opening, or coming up even into some half camels. If you would like to work on side crow prep, we're going to start by moving the knees over towards the left side of the mat. Hands walk back towards the knees, and then you're going to float the knees up so you're balancing on your toes in balancing ball pose. Now, we're going to start to walk the hands over towards the right. Fingertips pointing out to the right. Hands on forearms are set up as if you're coming into that plank pose or upward facing dog. Now, you want to pay attention to that left knee not shooting forward in front of the right knee. Inhale to lift the hips up enough so you can catch the outside of the right hip on the shelf of your right upper arm, and then start to move your torso forward over your hands, gazing about 8 inches in front of the hands, and then maybe you float just the right toes or left toes or both. Core is engaged. Just playing around with it. And then eventually exhaling, pushing that back. Maybe you lower the knees, take a break in tabletop, or start to walk the knees over towards the right side of the mat, hands back towards the knees. And if you're not doing side crow prep, again, you're going to go through some of those tabletop floating the knees and or maybe balancing ball like this, and or you're welcome to do half camel. Now this time, you're going to walk the hands over towards the left, setting the hands and forearms into plank or upward facing dog style. This time, you're wanting that right hip to stay back and aligned so that your right knee isn't trying to push forward, keeping it back. Lifting the hips to catch that left hip with the left up elbow, and then inhale, float the upper body forward, and then feel the weight of the body on the hands and forearms. Maybe you float the toes one at a time. Maybe you play around with just popping them up for half a second. And then exhale, push it back. Lower the knees down, swing them around, and come to a seat. Now, you can rest right here. We are going to move into some half heroes pose, which is really an intense opening for the quadricep and hip flexor, as well as for the low back and the chest. If you know that that's not an option for you, and or that flexion, that deep flexion on your knee is not a good fit for you, then instead I'm going to invite you to either do some of those half camels while you're kneeling, or another option is to come into setting up for Janu Shvanasana with the right leg extended, left knee bent, and the foot inside the thigh. And then you're just going to walk your hands back behind you and start to lift the sternum, maybe even starting to float the hips if that's appropriate. Otherwise, if you'd like to do half heroes pose, you're going to shift over to the right hip, swing that left foot back behind you. So again, like I said, that deep flexion on the knee. And you want those left toes pointing straight back behind you with the heel up towards the ceiling. And then from here, inhaling to lift the sternum towards the ceiling as your hands come back behind your hips. Maybe you exhale to lower down to your elbows. You can keep the chin tucked in towards the chest, or you can bring the gaze to the ceiling. If you feel like there's enough space and it's appropriate for you, you're going to release the elbows and lower all the way down to your back, as long as that left knee is not popping up. If the left knee pops up, your body's saying it's just a little bit too much today. Whichever position you're in, we'll just breathe, focusing on lengthened inhales and lengthened exhales. Just one more cycle. Now, if you are fully reclined, to come out of that, you're going to get those elbows secure on the floor. Inhale to push into your elbows and forearms, tucking that chin in, push the floor away with the forearms, and float your torso up. Hands over to the right side, bringing the weight over there to swing that left leg around. And then this time, weight over to the left, and bring that right toes around. Now, if you are not doing half heroes, you're going to, again, extend that left leg long and just tuck the right foot inside the inner thigh of the left leg. And then again, repeat opening up the front side of the body. Now from here, if you're going into half heroes, you can have those hands back behind, just lifting the sternum. If there's comfort and space, maybe you lower down to the elbows. If you did it on the other side and it's appropriate on this side, which it's not always the same between each side, maybe you lower down to your back. Whichever option you have chosen, your breath is your guide. Lengthen inhales and lengthen exhales while you are creating more opening in the spaces in your body is a good thing. If your breath is choppy or short, your body is asking you to back off. If you're fully reclined, again, tucking those elbows down to the mat, really pressing into the elbows and forearms to inhale, tuck the chin in, push off, and lift the torso up. Swinging that leg back around in front of you. Coming into a seated pike pose, toes floating up to the ceiling. Maybe you're even engaging the quadriceps so much that the heels float off as you lift the torso or the sternum towards the toes towards the sternum, hands alongside the hips. Now you're welcome to stay right here, or you can inhale to lift the arms, and then as you exhale, start to hinge forward from the hips, keeping that spine in neutral until your hamstrings and low back say it's enough. And then exhaling the hands down towards the mat, reaching still the sternum towards the toes. On your next exhale, if it's appropriate, maybe you go ahead and round the spine over the legs. Now, if you notice that you need to have a very significant bend in the knees in your seated forward fold, that's totally appropriate and fine. Whatever your hamstring and low back are asking for, that's what we do. And if you have that big gap, maybe you can either rest your hands under your calves, maybe you bring the hands to opposite side, or maybe you go ahead and grasp opposite elbows. And then if you can, rest the forearms on the floor, and maybe you start to press the knees into the forearms. Now again, creating that mad cat with your upper and middle back, really opening across the backs of the shoulders and that upper back. Inhale the gaze towards the toes. Exhale to release the hands. Inhale to float the torso up. Inhale your hands back towards your sits bones. Now, depending on your shoulder mobility and your elbows and your wrists, it could be anywhere from hands at the hips or hands all the way back behind you. Not one right or wrong answer. But as you go down, play around with it, adjusting the hands if you need to, and start to lower back to your elbows. Sternum again, lifting towards the ceiling. Chin can stay tucked in. Now we're going to go into a variation of fish pose. It's a pretty intense chest opener, and it can create some tension in the back. So I want you to pay attention to what your body is telling you. You're going to stay right here if this is appropriate for you. If you would like to go a little deeper, you're going to try to bring those elbows closer together back behind you. Pull the shoulder blades down towards the back waist, and then popping that sternum up towards the ceiling. Maybe you go ahead and lower the top of the head back behind you with your hands underneath your tail. It's not for everyone, so stay in whichever variation feels best for your body. Inhale to float that up, tuck the chin into the chest, and then press into your hands to push the torso up. Release the hands away and go ahead and lower all the way back down to the mat. Holding here for a cycle of breath, allowing the body to feel the foundation of the floor. Taking an inhale, float the right knee up, and then the left. And then on an exhale, bring the feet, bottoms of the feet towards the ceiling and legs up the wall. If you're ready to begin calming the body, preparing for Shavasana, this is where you're going to stay. If you would like just one more quick core strengthener, you're going to tuck your hands under your pelvis. Take an inhale to prepare. And as you exhale, squeeze the legs together as one leg and lower them down to about 60 degrees. Inhale here. Exhale, lower the legs down to about 45 degrees. Inhale here. Exhale, pressing that low back down, you're going to release the legs to about 30 degrees. Inhale here. And then exhale, lower the heels to hovering over the mat as you tuck the chin in to the chest in canoe pose. Inhale, bring those heels up to about 30 degrees as you release the head back down, releasing the low back to the floor. Inhale up to 45 degrees. Inhale the heels up to 60 degrees. Inhale up to 90 degrees at legs up the wall. Exhale, pulling the knees into the chest. Inhale to release the arms out from the shoulders, and then exhale, allow the knees to fall over to the right as the chin comes over to the left. Closing the eyes now, if that's comfortable for you, to start initiating the sensations of Shavasana. Inhale the chin to center as you float the knees up. Exhale the knees over to the left as the chin comes over to the right. Inhale the chin to center, float the knees up. And then as you exhale, slide the legs down and out. Maybe even ankles and heels coming off the mat, allowing those toes to fall open, taking up space,
pulling the shoulder blades down the back to allow more space in the chest and shoulders. Upper arms open to the ceiling, and then from there, pivot from the elbow and lower the hands to the floor. Resuming your focus and attention solely on your breath. As you continue to redirect your attention to this next inhale and this next exhale, allow the body to fully assimilate all of the shapes and moves that you just offered it, resetting again the central nervous system. Take one more lengthened inhale. Start to bring movements to the fingers and toes. On an exhale, allow that movement to move into the ankles and wrists, knees and elbows, hips and shoulders. Next inhale, maybe it would feel good to do that lengthened full body stretch, pulling it apart from the waist. And then exhale, help yourself over to your side body. Resting your head on your upper arm just to acclimate for a breath or two. And then inhaling, push the floor away, come up to seated. Any comfortable seated position. Inhale to bring the hands to heart center. Close the eyes if that's comfortable for you. Resume the breath. Taking just a moment to acknowledge those who have gone before that discovered the practice of yoga that has benefited us even today. Take an inhale. As you exhale, lower the chin towards the chest, blink the eyes open, and namaste.